A message sent from Ouagadougou has rippled across continents. Captain Ibrahim Traoré spoke directly to former U.S. President Donald Trump about the unfolding crisis in Nigeria, warning against foreign intervention and insisting that Africa must determine its own destiny. This is not an empty provocation. It is a deliberate declaration born of history, indignity, and a renewed refusal to let others set the terms of African life. In the coming minutes, you will hear a carefully measured yet uncompromising address, a speech that reframes grievance as dignity, resistance as responsibility, and sovereignty as the only acceptable path forward. For too long, outsiders have told our story for us. Others wrote our histories, filmed our images, and taught our children a version of the world that left no room for our memory, our pride, or our truth. Africa was described by pens, cameras, and podiums that stood far from our soil, as if we were absent from our own fate. That era must end. We now reclaim the right to speak for ourselves. Our silence was never surrender. It was the result of being covered, muted by colonizers, by propaganda, and by those who feared the power of an awakened continent. Today, that cover is being lifted. Africa remembers itself, and in remembering it restores its honor. When we tell our own story, we speak a history of endurance and achievement, not of defeat. Our past is filled with great kingdoms, learned scholars, skilled builders, fierce protectors, and creative minds whose influence rippled beyond our borders long before outsiders came to write about us. The lands labeled poor by distant commentators are rich in resources and knowledge. Civilizations dismissed as primitive built systems and sciences that later inspired the world. We were not and are not a people in need of salvation. We have always needed the space to breathe and the room to rise. This resurgence is not a cry for revenge. It is a claim for dignity. For generations, our resources were taken, our borders cut by foreign hands, and our minds instructed to look outward for identity and guidance. That conditioning made it easier for others to control us. We declare today that Africa's sovereignty means exactly that. Africans decide. Land, minerals, policy, partnerships, these belong to our people. We will not accept decisions made in distant rooms for the benefit of those who profited from our silence. Sovereignty is not arrogance. It is the right to self-determination and the responsibility to secure the well-being of our citizens. Dignity must be more than rhetoric. It must translate into food for children, schools that teach truth, hospitals that heal, and economies that serve communities rather than extract their wealth. We are fighting not for speeches, but for life, decent work, security, and the chance for every child to grow with pride rather than shame. If we fail to secure these essentials, the chains of dependency will pass to the next generation. We refuse that future. We refuse to be less than who we are. There are those in the world who built power by keeping Africa weak. Their wealth often rested on the extraction of our gold, oil, and labor, on the profits of unequal exchange, and the preservation of a narrative that kept Africa small in the eyes of the world. But an awakened Africa unsettles that calculus. When we stand up and control our destiny, those accustomed to easy profit fear displacement, not because Africa seeks to harm others, but because freedom and dignity threaten the profits of those who benefit from exploitation. That is why attempts are made to paint our leaders as dangerous and to sow division among our people. The tactic is old and predictable. We see it, and we will not yield to it. This awakening is rooted in hope, resilience, and creativity. Africa is young. Its population is a wellspring of talent, innovation, and energy. Where the world grows old, Africa grows young, and with youth comes possibility. Our innovators, entrepreneurs, scientists, and artists are building solutions for our futures, not waiting for permission or handouts. Agriculture, technology, manufacturing, and health innovations are emerging across our nations. We will no longer be content to export raw materials and import finished wealth. We will process our resources here, create jobs, and build industries that benefit our people. Impossible is not in our vocabulary. History demanded of our ancestors endurance that other peoples never faced, and yet they preserved culture, language, and spirit. Slavery, colonization, exploitation, none erased our identity. Each recovery was proof that the impossible can be overcome. Today, those who say Africa cannot unite or cannot govern itself are confronted by a continent proving them wrong. We are designing systems that reflect our values, training leaders who serve rather than subjugate, and forging alliances built on mutual respect. Whenever the world says you cannot, Africa answers, watch us. The African diaspora is integral to this revival. Those who left, whether forced or seeking opportunity, carry with them the continent's memory and strength. They return not as tourists, but as partners, to invest, to rebuild, to reconnect, and to renew a circle broken by history. This return is strategic as well as emotional. When Africans at home and abroad recognize their shared destiny, unity becomes practical power, investment, knowledge transfer, and political influence that advance collective interests. Control of narrative is crucial to this project. For too long, global media framed Africa through narrow lenses of crisis and scarcity, obscuring our achievements and dampening our self-image. A continent must speak for itself. That is why the creation of robust, independent African media platforms matters. To tell our own stories, to broadcast our innovations, and to educate our children with the truth of their history. A Pan-African network rooted in our soil would not be an instrument of anger, but a channel of truth and healing. It would give visibility to our thinkers, artists, and innovators, and knit together our peoples across borders. At the heart of this message to President Trump and to all foreign actors who would intervene in Nigeria or elsewhere, there is a simple insistence: do not substitute force for engagement, and do not assume that outside intervention is necessary to correct problems we must own and solve together. The region's challenges demand African leadership, African solutions, and African collaboration. External pressure that ignores national sovereignty risks inflaming tensions rather than healing them. Where assistance is welcome, it must respect the agency of African governments and peoples, not treat them as objects to be saved. Burkina Faso's stance is consistent with this conviction. Our leadership rejects both paternalism and covert pressure. We insist on mutual respect in diplomacy and on remedies that empower rather than patronize. Recent exchanges over deportation proposals and diplomatic pressure have underscored the need for dignity in international relations. Dignity that does not come with conditions that humiliate or reduce national agency. Captain Traoré's words are not an isolated outburst. They are part of a broader posture that has won attention across the continent and abroad. His public persona, a leader who frames Africa's revival as an active, strategic project, has been widely discussed in global coverage, and his rhetoric sits within a historical tradition of leaders insisting on self-reliance and anti-imperialism. Those who watch closely see an argument for partnership that begins with equality, not with subservience. This is not to deny the very real humanitarian and security threats facing Nigeria and other nations. Violence, persecution, and displacement demand urgent attention. But solutions imposed from outside, unilaterally and without respect for sovereignty, risk deepening wounds. Regional coordination, African-led peace-building, and support that strengthens local capacity must be the first recourse. International partners can contribute materially and technically in ways that respect African leadership and do not replicate patterns of domination. The recent public debates in global capitals about the appropriate response to violence in Nigeria illustrate how fraught unilateral threats can be and why sober, multilateral diplomacy with African agency must be prioritized. Rebuilding our nations requires practical priorities: education that teaches truth, health systems that save lives, agricultural policies that secure food sovereignty, and industries that process our resources locally. Real solidarity is measured by work on the ground, investing in schools, hospitals, farms, and factories, not by grand speeches in foreign chambers. When our villages and cities are strong, our nations are strong. When our people are healthy, educated, and economically empowered, our sovereignty is substantive rather than symbolic. This moment is an invitation to leadership, leadership grounded in service, compassion, and courage. To President Trump and to all leaders beyond our shores, the message is clear. Respect Africa's agency, partner with us on equal terms, and understand that interventions without consent or respect for sovereignty will face principled opposition. We do not seek conflict. We seek respect. We do not reject cooperation. We demand that cooperation be just. Africa's renaissance is underway. It is not a nostalgic return to the past, but a forward movement built on memory and innovation. It is a rise that will not be halted by those who prefer the old order. When Africans reclaim their narrative, their resources, and their institutions, the world will be different, fairer, more balanced, and more secure for everyone. That is the future we fight for. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's message is therefore both a warning and an appeal. A warning to those who would impose solutions without consent, and an appeal to the conscience of nations to respect the dignity and sovereignty of Africa. It is a call to Africans at home and in the diaspora to deepen their unity, to invest in shared futures, and to build institutions that embody the dignity they seek. We rise not to dominate, but to assert the simple truth that our destiny must be determined by us. The voice of Africa will no longer be a whisper in the margins of global debate. It will be a clear, confident proclamation of what is just, humane, and right. That is the message sent to President Trump and to the world from Ouagadougou. Respect us, partner with us, and walk with us, but do not direct us. The century we are shaping will be one where Africa stands tall, decides for itself, and invites the world to join it as an equal.